Kenichi is your average Japanese salaryman, and one day, while overworking himself as usual, he collapses to the floor. Normally this would be where he gets sent to another world, but in Kenichi's case, he just survives and sues his company so he can retire on a farm. Life has been going pretty well for him, but all of a sudden, while he's making lunch for himself, he vanishes and appears in the middle of a forest. He tries looking around to figure out where he is, but all he finds is the skeleton of a fallen knight and a bunch of unfamiliar plants. He has watched a lot of anime in his lifetime, so he knows this is probably an Isekai adventure. To confirm it, he yells out status window to see if something happens. To his surprise, his status screen does indeed appear, so he is definitely stuck in another world, and honestly he's fine with that. He checks out his status, but he's a bit confused since he can't see any HP bar on the screen. However, he does have his Amazon account, so he can still make as many impulsive purchases as he wants. He also has access to an item box, so he picks up a handful of weeds to test out what the item box can do. He puts the weeds in his item box and figures out that he can separate and retrieve the individual components from the items he puts in it. He also decides to test out the store, so he takes a look at it, but unfortunately he still needs money to buy things. There's a prompt that says he's allowed to trade items in his item box for money, but right now all he's got is a couple of weeds and those aren't worth much. He has literally nothing valuable to trade for money, so at this rate he's probably going to starve. But just then he notices the shiny equipment on the dead knight, and since he's dead anyway, it's not like he needs it anymore. And the first thing Kenichi does is buy some daily necessities and some bread from the store. Afterwards, he buries the knight's skeleton to pay his respects and leaves the area on the new bicycle he bought. He's searching for some kind of settlement so he can talk to some people and earn some money, but he has no idea where he is. For now, he decides to just set up camp for the night, since he's not going to find anything today. However, if he doesn't find a city, he plans to resell some of the things he buys from the store to gain a massive profit. If he does that, he should be able to survive and thrive in this world. But there's just one problem. Until now, Kenichi hadn't considered that it would be dangerous out in the middle of the woods. Once night falls, he gets surrounded by a pack of wolves and they don't look like they are friendly. Kenichi freaks out because he knows he's dead meat if he doesn't act fast. So he turns to his store and immediately tries to purchase the biggest gun he can find. Unfortunately, guns aren't available, so he settles for the next best thing and buys a bunch of fireworks. The fireworks scare the wolves a little, but it's ultimately not enough to get rid of them. Kenichi starts looking for something else. He eventually finds a slingshot and uses it to fire balls at the wolves. The force from the balls is so strong that it knocks a couple of the wolves out and makes the rest reconsider their options, since Kenichi clearly isn't as easy a target as they thought. Once the wolves back off, Kenichi immediately rushes over to his bike and rides into the night to get as far away from wolf territory as possible. By the next morning, Kenichi is exhausted from all the biking he did, but he's still got no idea where he is. He buys a ladder and a telescope so he can climb up one of the trees and look at his surroundings. Thankfully, he manages to spot a city over in the distance, so he should be able to start earning money if he heads over there. He begins the long journey through the grasslands, but as he finally makes it to the main road, he nearly ends up getting run over in the process. The guy in the cart apologizes for nearly hitting him, and since he feels bad about it, he offers to give Kenichi a ride to the city. He introduces himself as Fuyu, a merchant, and the woman in the back of his carriage is traveling Bard, so she's a fellow passenger. While they ride, Fuyu mentions how Kenichi is dressed pretty strangely, so he asks him what he's heading to the city for, and Kenichi responds, saying he plans to open a business there. Eventually they make it through the city gates, so Fuyu drops Kenichi off in front of his store and Kenichi helps him unload his cargo. Fuyu thanks Kenichi for his help, but Kenichi is the one who should be thankful here since really helped him out. To show his gratitude, he gives Fuyu a pouch of pepper, but once Fuyu realizes what this is, he warns Kenichi not to sell it in this city. There's a spice mafia called Bacopa, and they have a total monopoly on the spice market, so if Kenichi tries to compete with them, they might send the Boeing assassin after him. Kenichi hadn't realized that simply selling his goods could be so dangerous, so he is thankful for Fuyu's warnings. Fuyu normally wouldn't want to risk drawing the attention of Bacopa, but since it's a private deal between him and Kenichi, he decides to buy the pepper. Kenichi tries to tell him he doesn't have to pay for it, but Fuyu insists since a merchant never accepts anything for free, because that would mean he owes Kenichi a favor. Kenichi can understand that, so he accepts Fuyu's payment, but even though he was giving Fuyu a discount, he still got a lot more than he was expecting. He only paid 1,000 yen for that pepper, but Fuyu paid him the equivalent of 100,000 yen for it. Kenichi walks around town for a bit, and he eventually finds a local inn and restaurant, so he heads in and is greeted by the hostess Azalea. He tells her he is here for lodging, and she would be happy to help with that, so she shows him to the front desk. The price for one room is 1 copper coin, and payment has to be made up front, so Kenichi gives her the money. Now all she needs Kenichi to do is write his name in the contract, but Kenichi suddenly realizes that he doesn't know how to write in this country's language. Azalea notices Kenichi's strange clothing, so she asks if he's some kind of foreign ambassador, but Kenichi tells her that he's just in town because he wants to start up his own business. Azalea is supportive, but she doesn't think Kenichi will be accepted by the Merchant Guild since they require their members to be able to read, write, and do math, and he apparently can't. Kenichi is perfectly literate, but he just doesn't understand the language of this country, and as for math, he's pretty good at it, so that shouldn't. So she asks him a basic multiplication problem to test, making him a math genius in this world. Moving on, since Kenichi needs to learn to read and write, he asks her if candy. She's totally on board. It's basically impossible to get sweets in the kingdom of Caddon since only nobles ever get to buy things like this. In fact, if the nobles found out that she has such wonderful sweets, they would probably try to take them away from her, but she refuses to let that happen. After Azalea calms down from her sugar rush, she begins teaching Kenichi about this world's language, and it's pretty easy for him to understand since it's similar to the katakana of Japanese. The numbers also follow the same decimal system, so it's not long before Kenichi is able to read and write perfectly. Azalea is amazed that he was able to learn the language in just a few hours. And if he can do that, then he's definitely smart enough to make a good name for himself as a merchant. So she's starting to consider him as a good marriage partner. Kenichi thinks Azalea is joking since he is old enough to be her father, so he doesn't take her statement seriously. He finishes the portraits he had been drawing of her, and when Azalea sees it, she is overjoyed because it looks exactly like her, and normally only nobles get to have their portrait taken. Kenichi has given her delicious candy and drawn a portrait for her, so she can't let him go without giving him something in return, which is why she jumps on top of him, and that night Kenichi makes a clap. The next morning, Kenichi arrives at the Merchant Guild and meets with one of the representatives because he wants to register with them. The representative gives him some paperwork to fill out, and once he's done with that, all he has to do is pay the registration fee and he will officially be a member of the Merchant Guild. The registration fee is 1 silver, but that's like 50,000 yen, so he can't afford to pay it all at once and asks to pay in installments instead. Thankfully, the guild allows partial payments, so Kenichi is now an official member of the Merchants Guild. The receptionist hands him an ID stick and tells him to have it visible whenever he is conducting business because it serves as proof that he is part of the Merchant Guild. Now that he is registered, Kenichi decides to take a walk around the market to figure out how much things cost around here, and overall, all manufactured goods are way more expensive than they would be if he bought them from his store. The only things that are reasonably priced are foods, so while Kenichi is there, he buys a bag of fruit from a vendor. The next day, Kenichi is working on creating a stand so he can sell his goods out in town, and Azalea is impressed by how easy it was for him to make it. While Kenichi is putting on a couple of flyers, Azalea notices that he's using clothespins, and she's really interested in these since their design is really cool. The clothespins that exist in this world are made of wood and a rubber band, but they break so easily that they are practically useless. She asks Kenichi if he's selling these as well, but Kenichi hadn't even considered the fact that something as simple as cloth spins could be so valuable. Later that day, Kenichi heads out into the market for his first day as a merchant and finds a good spot next to an old lady. He asks her if she's fine with him setting up his stall here, and she has no problem with it, so Kenichi pulls his stall out of his item box. Anama is impressed by Kenichi's selection of goods, so she looks around for a bit and spots the clothespin he is selling. She really likes them, so she offers to buy a couple. And Kenichi is surprised since he didn't think she would want to support her competition. Anama points out that there's no rule saying she can't buy from him, and besides, she doesn't plan on having some sort of rivalry with him anyway. As the day goes on, Kenichi's stall begins attracting customers, so his goods are being sold fast. Specifically, the clothespins have become quite popular for their reliability, so Kenichi could probably make a living off selling those alone. However, he knows other people will eventually create similar clothespins, so he can't rely on them forever. Just then, a man comes over to Kenichi's stall, and from the fact that he has a sword on his hip and really nice clothes, Kenichi can tell that the guy must be a noble. The man says he wants to have a look at Kenichi's knife, so Kenichi lets him test it out. After the man is satisfied with the sharpness tests, he asks for the price. Kenichi tells him the knife costs 2 silver, and that's pretty expensive, but the man can understand why since this knife is excellently made. He would love to buy it, but he needs a blade that's slightly longer, so Kenichi checks his shop to see if there's anything bigger available, and eventually he manages to find a katana. The man absolutely loves the katana, but Kenichi tells him the price is 1 gold coin, and that's really expensive, so the man isn't sure if he should buy it or not. While Kenichi watches the man try to convince himself that the sword is a necessary expense, a cat girl starts sniffing his face and licks him. This is the first time Kenichi has ever seen any beast folk, so he's a little scared at first. But he soon comes down and asks them what they would like to buy. They tell them they want the cloth that he is using to cover his stall, and those originally weren't meant to be sold. But Kenichi is a businessman, so if they want the cloths, then he will sell them the cloth. He tells them 1 cloth costs 3 copper pieces, but since they want to buy 3, he will give them a discount and only charge 8 copper instead. That's a good deal for them, but the beast folk are really bad at math, so they don't understand what Kenichi said at all and assume he's trying to scam them. The nobleman tells the beast folk that Kenichi is telling them the truth, so they don't need to worry about being scammed. So they take his word for it and buy the cloths. The man also decides to buy the sword since it is incredibly well made, so by the end of the day, Kenichi made a really good profit. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the city, a maid who bought Kenichi's clothespins shows them to her master, Primula. Margaret asks Primula if they can use these in the mansion since they would make her work a lot easier, and Primula thinks that's a good idea, so she tells Margaret to go buy some more tomorrow. Better yet, she wants to sell these clothespins at her own company, since this is a gold mine of opportunity, so she runs off to ask her father for permission. That evening, Kenichi is taking a bath by the well, and he really wishes he could have a warm bath, but those haven't been invented yet, so he's going to have to make one himself. He looks through the store to see if there's anything he could use to make the hot bath, and he happens to find a barrel for sale, so he intends to fill it with water and put it over a fire so he can experience a hot bath again. And if his idea works out, then he might be able to make some profit from it. That aside, Kenichi has been benefiting a lot from his online store screen, but he has no idea how it actually works, or how the packages even get to him in the first place. To be honest, it's way too good to be true, so Kenichi worries it might steal his soul as compensation at some point, but for now there's no use worrying about it, so he decides to go to sleep. Meanwhile, out in the forest, there's a little girl named Anemone, and she's currently on the run. The story continues. We see next day, as Kenichi is setting up his store, he decides to update his inventory a little, so he puts some jewelry up for sale. These aren't valuable gems by any means, but they look pretty, so he should be able to make a decent profit off them. Just then, the maid from yesterday, Margaret, shows up and says she is here to buy some more clothespins from Kenichi. He asks her how many she wants to buy, and he's surprised to hear that she wants 100, but she has the money for it, so he finalizes the sale. While he is packing up the pins for her, Margaret notices some of the jewels he set out and asks if they are made of real diamonds. Kenichi tells her the jewels are all made from polished glass, but even so, they look really nice, so Margaret asks him to set one aside, so she can come back and buy it later. Business goes on as usual for the rest of the day, but just as Kenichi is about to close up shop for the day, the beast folk from yesterday come back to his shop. They look pretty serious, so Kenichi is worried that they might be here to beat him up. But then Miley gets up close to his face, and tells the others that she definitely smells spices coming from him. The other beast folk begin celebrating and ask Kenichi to sell him some of his spices, but he is hesitant to do so after what he heard about the Spice Syndicate. He has no idea how they operate, or what they'll do to him if they find out that he's selling spices, so he doesn't want to risk it. The beast folk keep begging him to make an exception, but the people in the area tell them that they can't expect a new guy like Kenichi to risk his business for their sake, and the beast folk seem to get the message. Kenichi can't sell them any spices, but it technically won't be breaking any rules if he just shares a meal with them, so he invites the group to come eat with him. But it's going to have to be out in the woods, so he doesn't attract any negative attention. The beast folk are really happy to hear this, so later that night they all meet Kenichi and Anama on the outskirts of town so they can begin cooking. Kenichi is about to begin cooking and Anama asks if she can help, so he tells her to cut some of the veggies for him. However, when Anama takes a look at the veggies, she can't believe how vibrant and juicy they look. Kenichi explains that he got these from a foreign country, and he can guarantee that these taste really good. While Kenichi and Anama are working on the veggies, Miley and the other beast folk are busy in the river trying to catch some fish, and soon enough they manage to get a decent amount. Now that all the ingredients are ready, Kenichi begins prepping the fish with the spices and throws everything in a pot to cook for a while, eventually resulting in a meal that the beast folk absolutely love. They'd never tasted anything like this before, so they are really thankful for the meal, but all this good food is making them crave alcohol really bad. Anama tells them to show some restraint since alcohol is really expensive, but Kenichi sees no harm in giving them a little to drink, so he pulls out a bottle of cheap booze and pours them a couple of glasses. But in exchange, he wants them to swear that they'll never tell a soul about the meal he made for them. Anama warns Kenichi that he's being a little too generous, but he doesn't see anything wrong with letting the beast folk enjoy themselves, especially since they seem to be good people. That night, they drink together, bathe together, and eventually fall asleep under the stars, and Miley seems to really like Kenichi now. The next morning, Kenichi returns to the inn, and Azalea is a bit upset, since he was out all night. Kenichi tries to explain that he was just hanging out with a couple of beast folk outside town, but judging from the cat lady fur on his jacket, she thinks Kenichi did a lot more than just hang out, and she's mad he chose to do it with a cat lady instead of her. Later that day, Kenichi is setting up his shop for another day of business, but as he is doing so, Margaret shows up with Primula to visit Kenichi's shop. Kenichi is distracted by Primula's beauty at first, but then he notices Margaret standing behind her, and realizes they must be here to buy that necklace Margaret asked about yesterday. He brings it out, and Margaret pays for it before giving it to Primula so she can inspect it. And with how well it is made, she's having a hard time believing that it's not made of real diamonds. She asks him if he has any more of these in stock, so Kenichi buys a bunch more from his store and brings them out to show her. Primula is incredibly impressed by the quality of Kenichi's products, as well as the fact that he has an item box, so she has a request to make of him. She tells him that she is the daughter of the owner of the Mallow Trading Company, and if Kenichi is willing to accompany her, she would like to introduce him to her father. Kenichi likes the idea of meeting with the owner of a major trading company, but he is hesitant to meet any big shots, since it might spell trouble for him. However, Anama tells him that Primula's father is well known around town, and everyone says he's a man of good character, so Kenichi doesn't have to worry about getting into trouble with him. Since that's the case, Kenichi agrees to go with Primula, so she invites him to join her in her carriage so they can go meet her father. Along the way, Primula shows him some cloth spin replicas she had made, and although the wood shape was easy enough to copy, the metal clamp was too complex for her craftsman to make. Kenichi can understand why they weren't able to figure it out, because even he doesn't know how the springs are made, but he doesn't know that it's a complicated process. They eventually arrive at Primula's home and Kenichi is amazed by how huge it is, but compared to the houses nobles around here have, Primula says this is actually pretty small. They head inside, and Kenichi is introduced to Primula's father, Mallow. They both greet each other, and Mallow invites Kenichi to have his seats so they can begin their discussion. Once Kenichi has settled in, he shows Mallow some of the jewelry he has, and Mallow is just as impressed as Primula was. On top of that, Primula tells him that Kenichi possesses an item box, and Mallow finds this interesting because he also has one. His item box is what allowed him to build his trading company to this level in the first place. So if used properly, he thinks Kenichi could become quite successful. Although, right now Kenichi is just using it to store his supplies. Anyway, the reason Mallow wanted to meet with Kenichi is because he wants to discuss the possibility of Kenichi becoming the official supplier for the Mallow Company. Kenichi had expected a proposal like this, and assumes Mallow intends to market it in such a way to maximize profits. However, if that's what Mallow is after, Kenichi asks why he didn't just keep buying the items from his store for cheap and resell them later on. Mallow definitely could have done that, but that's a sneaky business tactic, and if Kenichi ever found out they were reselling his goods without permission, he wouldn't be very happy about it. Also, having a direct conversation with Kenichi like this gives Mallow an edge over his competitors who would eventually approach him as well. With that being said, Mallows would like to begin their partnership negotiations and offers to pay Kenichi 50% of the retail price for his goods. Kenichi could have for a better deal, but he's honestly okay with this since he's already making a ridiculous amount of profit from his online store, so he accepts Mallow's offer and the two shake hands on it. He officially signs the supply contract, and the first few items he supplies Mallow would earn him over 1 million yen worth of coins. However, when Primula sees all the beautiful jewels Kenichi has in stock, she falls in love with them and asks her father if she can just buy these ones from Kenichi for herself. Malo sees no problem with that, so Primula offers to pay him 10 gold coins for them, which is equivalent to 2 million yen. So for the first time since he got here, Kenichi has an 8-figure bank balance. Since he's doing so well for himself, he decides to finally begin setting things up for his quiet life and buys a home from his store. The next day, he leaves the city walls and heads out into the forest to look for a good place to set up his home. Before he left, he told Azalea about his plan so she wouldn't be worried, but she thought it was a bit strange that Kenichi was willingly choosing to live out in the dangerous forest instead of staying in the city. Once he finally finds a good spot, Kenichi purchases a weed whacker and begins landscaping the area, but he runs into a problem since even though other things from his store are pretty cheap, fuel is always expensive no matter what world you live in. There's nothing he can do about it though, so he deals with the high cost and keeps working until he has eventually cleared a path for himself to get in and out of the forest. After that, he needs to start working on getting rid of all these trees, so he buys a chainsaw and starts cutting. After several hours of hard work, Kenichi has finally managed to cut through a bunch of the trees in the area, so all that's left is to move them out of the way. However, when he tries to stuff the trees in his item box, it doesn't work. It looks like the trees are too long to fit, so he's going to have to bust out the chainsaw again and cut them down into more manageable pieces. He eventually shortens the trees into 10-meter logs, and this way he's able to fit them in his item box, so he's almost done with the tree removal. The only thing left to do is pull out all the tree stumps, but that's going to be a lot of work and the sun is already setting, so he decides to come back and finish up tomorrow. The next day, Kenichi returns to the forest to finish the work, but after digging at the stump for a while, he realizes that this is way too much work for a middle-aged man like him. So rather than destroy his back over this, he decides to just buy a backhoe. However, once he actually sees it, he realizes he just spent 1.2 million yen on heavy machinery because he didn't want to do manual labor and he's kind of regretting that. But at the same time, this means he won't have to work as hard, so maybe it was a worthwhile investment. He starts up the engine, but then he realizes that this thing runs on diesel, and his store doesn't sell diesel at all. He starts panicking since it would be a huge waste if he couldn't use the backhoe after he spent so much money on it. He thinks for a second and realizes he could probably make his own diesel if he mixes kerosene and some additives, but when he's about to try it out, he realizes he could destroy the backhoe's engine if he gets the proportions of the mixture wrong. So just to be safe, he decides to test out his mixture on the diesel generator first. After filling it up, he tries turning it on and it seems to work fine, so he knows his homemade diesel will work with the backhoe, so he intends to return tomorrow to finish the job. In the meantime, he needs to do something about all the bugs out here, so the next day, he decides to head to a local magic shop to buy some bug-repellent magic stones. As he enters the shop, the wizard who owns it greets Kenichi and asks him where he's from since he hasn't seen him around here before. Kenichi explains that he's a foreigner who just recently set up a shop in town, and he's here because he wants to buy some bug-repellent stones. The wizard tells him that those stones cost 3 silver coins, but that's really expensive, so Kenichi tries to make a deal and offers to give the wizard 2 oranges if he can lower the price. The wizard has never seen oranges before, so he thinks they must be some kind of exotic fruit and agrees to give Kenichi a discount because of it. Later that day, Kenichi goes to talk to Anama, and she tells him that the wizard is a really knowledgeable guy, so he's a good person to have as a friend. Pretty much the exact opposite of the wanted criminal Shaga, whose wanted posters have been hung up all across town. He's the leader of a notorious bandit group, so the reward for his capture is pretty big. In fact, that night Shaga organizes a raid on a carriage full of slaves that were being transported, and who knows what he plans to do with him. The next day, Kenichi heads back into the forest so he can finally use his backhoe, and he no longer regrets his purchase because not only is it making his work a lot easier, but it's also really fun. Now, nothing can stop him from fulfilling his dream of living a quiet life in the woods. But after spending so much money on the backhoe, he's dangerously close to being broke, so he's going to have to put a hold on any further construction progress. The story continues. We see a little while later, Kenichi goes to meet with Mallow and Primula again in hopes of selling them some salt and sugar for a good profit. Mallow tests the sugar, and he is certainly pleased with its quality, but he can't actually buy it off Kenichi. The state reserves all rights to sugar and salt, so Mallow would get in trouble if he purchased it from an unauthorized source. However, on the bright side, those jewels Kenichi sold him before are selling like crazy, so Mallow would like to purchase more of those immediately. The extra jewels Kenichi just sold earned him 15 gold coins, which is roughly 3 million yen. so now he has enough money to finally purchase that log cabin he found in his store. He honestly still can't believe that there's a whole cabin for sale in his store, and for only 1.7 million yen too. It almost sounds too good to be true, but Kenichi isn't going to miss out on the deal, so he buys the log cabin. Unfortunately, the cabin must have been sourced from Akiha, because when he purchases it, he gets buried in a pile of wood planks and some instructions that he doesn't know how to follow. He takes a moment to read over the instructions manually, and just as he had feared, assembling this thing is going to be a major pain in the ass to do. But he has already paid for it, so he has no choice but to get it over with. As Kenichi begins building, the beast folk from earlier happen to be passing by, and as a show of gratitude, they decide to help Kenichi out with his construction. Several weeks go by, and thanks to the beast folks' help, Kenichi has been able to make steady progress on his log cabin while also keeping his stall open. And in just under a month of work, the construction of the cabin is finally out complete. He couldn't have gotten all this done in such a short time without the help of the beast folk, so to thank them, he organizes a nice barbecue party. However, even though the cabin is finally complete, there are still a ton of things that Kenichi has to do on his own, like painting the walls and the roof and generating electricity. It took another month to get all his necessities worked out, but once everything has finally been taken care of, Kenichi's home is completely self-sufficient. He made a fence around his house and farm, and as for electricity, he set up a couple of solar panels. Now that he is finally finished setting up his dream home, the first thing Kenichi does to celebrate is to take a nice warm bath. Although, he still needs to figure out how to get indoor plumbing since he had to make several bike trips to fill up this bath. The next morning, Kenichi heads back to the inn to tell Azalea that he's finally done with his forest cabin, so he won't be staying at this inn anymore. Azalea is a bit surprised since she didn't think Kenichi was serious when he said he wanted to build a house out in the forest, but she's also happy that he could achieve one of his goals, even if it means she won't get to see him as often anymore. The day after that, Kenichi wakes up in his cabin, and since the weather is so wonderful, he decides to go out and take some photos of the local flowers. However, his little joyride is cut short when he nearly gets shot by an arrow. Kenichi is so surprised that he falls off his bike, but more arrows are fired at him, so he ducks for cover behind a tree. The ones firing the arrows are seen to be some new beast folk that happens to live in the forest, and in their defense they were out here hunting, so they instinctively attacked him. But even after realizing that Kenichi is the human who built a house in this forest, they don't care and decide to kill him anyway. Kenichi has no idea why these beast folk are attacking him, but he's not going to sit back and let them do as they please, so he reaches into his inventory and pulls out his slingshot to return fire. The beast folk get a little spooked since they weren't expecting the weak human to fight back, and they start reevaluating their choices once Kenichi throws fireworks at them and pulls out his excavator. The beast folk have no intention of waiting around to see what that thing can do, so they all run away, and Kenichi is left wondering what that was all about, but just then he notices a wounded animal crying out in pain at the base of the tree. It has been shot in the leg and probably won't last much longer unless Kenichi does something quickly. He approaches the cat, but the cat doesn't trust him, so it snarls as he gets close. Kenichi doesn't want to get bitten, so he spends a little money buying some cushion armor in case the cat tries to bite him. But as he goes to remove the arrow, the cat hardly fights back, so it must be out of stamina. This makes it a lot easier to treat the cat's wounds, so he buys a bottle of alcohol to disinfect the wound, and then applies some antibiotic cream. The cat's wounds have been taken care of, but there's still no guarantee that it'll survive out in the open like this, so Kenichi decides to take it back to his house. He sets up a blanket for the cat to rest on, but it still hasn't moved muscles since he treated it, so he's starting to worry. He hasn't seen any vets since he came to this town, but there might be some kind of healing magic he can use, so he goes to ask the wizard about it. The wizard listens to Kenichi's story and realizes he must have found a bobcat, but he doesn't understand why Kenichi would want to bother healing it, since he could easily kill it and sell its fur for a good profit. The wizard isn't going to be of much help, so Kenichi heads back outside, and as he does so, Miley happens to be passing by, so she jumps on him and starts sniffing around. She smells the scent of a bobcat on him, and her people see bobcats as messengers of God, so she's really excited and wants to see it for herself. She follows Kenichi back to his house, and as soon as she sees the bobcat, she can already tell that its injury was caused by the dog beast folk, so she swears to make them pay. In the meantime, the bobcat seems to be doing a bit better, but it keeps trying to lick its wound, so Kenichi is forced to stick a cone on its head. Miley is impressed by how capable Kenichi is when it comes to healthcare, so she asks him if he's a doctor, but he says he just knows a bit of first aid. Miley wants to thank Kenichi for saving the bobcat, so she goes outside and does a little quick hunting to get Kenichi some bird meat, and once she brings her catch back, Kenichi grows it for their dinner. After eating, Miley is exhausted, so she asks Kenichi to let her stay here for the night. Kenichi asks her if it's alright for her to just ditch her work and spend the night here, but she is more worried about the bobcat than she's about work right now. Kenichi agrees to let her stay the night, but he only has one bed, so Miley suggests that the two of them sleep together, and Miley ends up on top of Kenichi's later that night. Several days later, the cat seems to be doing a lot better, so Kenichi decides to start working on his farm, but even though he can buy the seedlings and tools for his farm, he still has to think about his water situation, because having to run down to the river every time he wants to water his crops would be a major pain to deal with. The first thing that comes to mind is for him to construct a well with a pump, but that'll have to be a job for tomorrow because he's too tired to do it today. He goes to bed, and the next morning he wakes up to the feeling of the bobcat jumping on his stomach. As much as that hurt, he's happy to see that the bobcat is so full of energy, so he takes off his cone and releases it back into the wild to live its life. Now back to that well matter, Kenichi decides to take a few days off from running his stall so he can get to work on it. He drills a hole in the ground and installs an electric pump so he now has access to fresh water whenever he needs it. To celebrate, he starts filling up his bath so he can take a soak, but all of a sudden he hears Primula call out to him. He's surprised to see her here, so Primula explains that he didn't open his shop today, so she got a little worried and Miley told her about his log cabin, so she decided to visit him. She's impressed that Kenichi was able to build all of this on his own, but then she notices the giant excavator next to his house, so she asks him about it. Kenichi doesn't want to have to explain how that thing works, so he just says it's his summon familiar to keep it simple. Primula totally believes him, but now she thinks Kenichi can do magic, so he asks her to keep this a secret when she gets back home. Speaking of which, at this time of day, the city gates must have been closed already, so Primula won't be able to get home anymore. Primula was already aware of that, which is why she intends to spend the night with Kenichi, and even when Kenichi warns her that he only has one bed, she still insists that it's fine. Just then, she notices the barrel behind him, so she asks what it's for and Kenichi explains that it's a hot bath, so Primula gets excited and asks to try it out. By nightfall, Kenichi has warmed up the bath, so Primula gets in, and she absolutely loves the warm feeling. But the fact that she's in the middle of the woods makes her feel a little uneasy, so she starts calling for Kenichi. Kenichi tells her he's sitting right on the other side of the wall, but Primula says she would feel better if she could see him face to face. After she's done with her bath, Kenichi gives her a bathrobe to change into, and she's in love with how warm it feels, so she asks Kenichi if he can sell it to her. Kenichi tells her it's not for sale, but she keeps pleading with him, so he ends up agreeing to sell her a couple of bathrobes. Kenichi then gives her a nightgown to change into for bed, and Primula can hardly believe the variety of wonderful products Kenichi has on hand, so she's sure he will become the greatest merchant in the kingdom if he tried. However, Kenichi isn't interested in such a goal since it would cause a lot of trouble for him if he caught the attention of the nobles in the area. All he wants is to live a quiet life and earn enough money to be comfortable, so Primula promises him that she will do whatever she can to help him maintain his quiet life. A little while later, they go to bed, but Kenichi doesn't want a repeat of what happened with Miley, so he decided to just buy a second bed for Primula for the night to avoid any funny business. Meanwhile, over in the outlaws' camp, Shada seems to have received a job from someone really important, so this could spell trouble in the future. The next morning, Kenichi takes Primula back home, and while he's there, he decides to talk with Mallow about those bathrobes Primula asked about. Mallow is intrigued by the strange fabric, so he thinks it will sell really well. And since they are on the topic, Kenichi decides to bring up the possibility of selling something a little more spicy. Primula certainly seems interested, but Mallow shuts that idea down immediately. Just then, Margaret comes into the room to bring Mallow the ledgers he had requested, and since Kenichi seems a bit curious, Mallow explains that he is in the process of rewriting all the old ledgers, because the Empire has just come up with a brilliant new system for tracking sales called double-entry bookkeeping. Kenichi has taken aback since the double-entry system was common back in Japan. This also leads him to recall something Mallow had said about the Empire's influence spreading faster, thanks to the new inventions of a particular man. In fact, Mallow was just about to go test one of the latest inventions from that man, and to Kenichi's surprise, it was a pitcher pump. He already had his suspicions before this, but for someone to invent a pitcher water pump so easily would require prior knowledge of how it works, meaning there might be someone else in this world who was sent here from Japan, and Kenichi is slightly worried since he now has competition. Over the next few days, Primula would occasionally visit Kenichi and spend the night at his place, but tonight is special because she's going to be traveling for a supply run tomorrow, so she won't be able to visit for a while. She asks Kenichi if he still has that spicy nightgown because she'd like to buy it from him, so Kenichi asks if there's a guy she's trying to seduce, and Primula answers saying he with Primula, especially since he's friends with Mallow. And there's no way Mallow would agree with Primula getting involved with an old man like him. However, Primula tells Kenichi that she already got her father's approval, so that won't be a problem. Even so, Kenichi still has way too many things going on right now, so he can't handle a relationship discussion on hold for a while. Primula understands, but she said she would like to share the same bed as Kenichi at least once before she leaves, even if it's just to sleep next to him. The next morning, Kenichi gets an unexpected visit from a knight, and it turns out to be the guy he sold a sword to last time. His name is North Pole, and he was sent out here to investigate because there have been reports of a strange old man living in the woods. But since he already knows Kenichi, he can report back that nothing sinister is going on here. But before he leaves, he tells Kenichi about some interesting news he heard recently. There's a mage in the Empire who created this wonderful condiment called mayonnaise, and he somehow defeated a dragon with it. There's no doubt in Kenichi's mind that this mysterious man must have come from Japan, and with everything he has accomplished so far, Kenichi is feeling really outclassed here. The story continues. Still, it's not like he's going to run into this guy anytime soon, so the next month goes by without issue. Kenichi is sitting at his stall one afternoon when he realizes that Primula's supply run caravan should be returning soon, so he plans to visit her later today. However, just then, he hears a massive commotion in the town square, so he gets up to go see what it's about. Apparently, a caravan was attacked by bandits, and everyone aboard the caravan was kidnapped, including Primula. Mallow is seen begging the adventurers in the streets to help rescue his daughter, but since the bandit who kidnapped her is the infamous outlaw Shaga, no one wants to risk going up against him, and it will take days before the Knight's Order can organize a rescue mission under those circumstances. Meanwhile, Primula gets locked up in a cage by Shaga and his goons. She is still unharmed for now, but that's just because Shaga plans to sell her off as some sick nobles for extra money, and her chances of escaping on her own are practically zero. Mallow knows it's only a matter of time before Primula faces a terrible fate, so he is really desperate to save her and turns to Kenichi to beg for help. Now Kenichi is in no way capable of fighting, but he cares about Primula a lot, so he ends up agreeing to do something about the situation. However, he doesn't have enough funds on hand to pull it off, so he tells Mallow he's going to need some money to make his preparation. Without hesitation, Mallow hands over a bag of gold coins, as he is willing to give Kenichi every coin he owns as long as he can bring Primula back safe and sound. He tells Kenichi that Shaga's base of operations is in the ruins 50 kilometers west of Dahlia, and that's quite the distance, so Kenichi is going to have to get himself a ride. He looks through the cars available in his store and ultimately decides to buy a truck, but before he does, he warns everyone that he's about to use summoning magic, so they should all back away. He then does this silly little chant to trick everyone into thinking this is actually summoning magic, and once his truck appears, he climbs on top and asks if there's anyone willing to come fight with him. Shaga has a massive bounty on his head, so if they manage to take him down, there's going to be a huge reward for everyone involved. However, as enticing as that sounds, no one takes Kenichi up on his offer since Shaga is too much of a threat. Kenichi is starting to worry that he might have to do this by himself, but then the bobcat he rescued last month comes up to him, and even though he can't speak cat, you can tell that the bobcat is saying it wants to help. Speaking of cats, Miley and the other beast folk also want to help Kenichi, since they still owe him a favor for all the help he gave them. Kenichi is glad to see that he has people on his side, so to prepare them for battle, he buys a compound bow for Miley and an axe and some swords for Miley's brothers. Just then, he hears someone else say they want to help, so if he looks down and finds North Pole standing there, Kenichi feels a lot more reassured, knowing that an experienced knight will be coming with them, but he's a little curious as to why North Pole just happened to be walking through town in his full suit of armor. North Pole explains that he just got his new sword made with the steel Kenichi gave him, so he has been looking for an opportunity to use it all day, and slaying some bandits would be the perfect excuse. There's one more person who says they want to come along, but it turns out to be the magic shop owner, so Kenichi tries to tell him it's too dangerous for an old-timer like him. However, the old man reveals that he used to be a mage back in his day, and although he may be old, his fire spells are still just as deadly as they were in his prime. Kenichi agrees that the man would be useful in combat, so he lets him come along, but then Anama says she wants to come too. Kenichi tries to tell her to stay behind since there is literally nothing she could contribute in a fight, but even if she's not capable of fighting, she says she can still provide moral support and cook food for the group. She also promises to run away the second any fighting starts, so Kenichi won't have to worry about protecting her. He ends up agreeing to bring Anama along for moral support, but he draws the line when Malo says he wants to come too, so he tells him to just stay here and wait for Primula's safe return. Kenichi once again asks if there's anyone else who is willing to come with them, but all the remaining people are too scared of fighting Shaga, so they all back away and the crowd disappears. It looks like the 9 of them are going to have to do this on their own, so before they leave, Kenichi heads to the guild and registers himself as an adventurer, while also formally putting in a notice that he's going after Shaga's bounty. The group then sets out in Kenichi's truck, but as they leave the city, all the people who were too scared to fight begin mocking him because they think Kenichi is just going to run off the money Malo gave him. Meanwhile, in the ruins, Primula's cell is opened, so the girl Shaga captured as a slave can bring her some food. However, Primula notices that the girl is starving, so she offers to let her have the bread instead. The girl is grateful for Primula's kindness and begins eating right away, and while she eats, Primula asks her a couple of questions. She finds out that the girl is being held captive here as well, so she asks if she wants to escape with her. The girl would love to get out of here, but she doesn't think it's possible given their current circumstances. However, Primula is sure that it's only a matter of time before help comes for them. After getting close to the base, Kenichi and the others stop to take a break. Once they're done eating, Kenichi sits everyone down so they can begin their strategy meeting. Kenichi comes up with a basic plan of assault, and everyone thinks his plan is a good one, so they all get into position and Miley is sent out to do some recon. Kenichi is able to keep in touch with her by using some radios he bought. But to keep it simple, when Miley asks about the radio, he just tells her it's a magic device that allows them to talk over long distances. Now that Miley is in position to act as their scout, Kenichi and the others all climb into the truck so they can get going, and Anama is left behind for her own safety. Since there's no guarantee that they'll be able to win, Kenichi asks Anama to go contact the Adventurers Guild if they don't return within a day's time. Late into the night, Kenichi asks Miley for a status update on the bandits, and from what she can see, it looks like the bandits are having a party. In fact, most of the bandits are actually drunk right now, so this is the perfect chance for them to attack. Before they go in, one of the beast folk gets Kenichi's attention hands and a walnut. Kenichi asks what this is supposed to be, so the beast man explains that it's a pill to help take Kenichi's mind off the fact that he's going to have to kill people. Apparently that was good enough for Kenichi, so he takes a bite of the pill, and he is instantly sent on the most intense trip of his life. Kenichi hardly knows what's going on anymore, but he remembers he has a mission to do, so he gets behind the wheel and starts driving like a maniac through the forest. Over in the bandits' camp, all the bandits are still busy having a good time. All of a sudden, as 2 of them spot the truck approaching, they are shot in the head by Miley. Next up, they have to get through the castle gate, so the old man climbs on top of the truck's roof and casts an explosion spell to blow a hole straight through. By this point, the entire bandit camp has been put on high alert, but it's already too late as Kenichi and the others have made it inside. Since the bandits were drinking so much before this, they are all drunk and have no armor on, so Miley and her brothers are able to make quick work of the first few that get within striking range. North Pole then gets out of the truck and he's really excited to stain his new sword with the blood of his enemies. Kenichi is so impressed by North Pole's strength that he gets distracted and a bandit tries to use the opportunity to stab him in the back. But luckily, the Bobcat steps in to save him just in time. More bandits begin emerging from the ruins, so Kenichi decides to pull out the big guns and summons his backhoe to squish them. The beast folk keep doing their best to take out as many bandits as possible, and North Pole is over here flexing his superiority over the bandits. While Kenichi is tormenting the bandits with his backhoe, he accidentally tears a hole in one of the walls and finds a ton of the bandits' prisoners inside. He checks to see if Primula is in there with them, but to his horror, it looks like Shaga had anticipated their rescue mission because he is holding Primula hostage at the top of the tower. Primula is relieved that Kenichi actually came to rescue her, but Shaga is mortified because all his men have been wiped out. He assumed that a party would be sent to rescue Primula eventually, but he never could have imagined that they would be this strong. However, even with the current situation, Shaga still thinks he has the upper hand, so he demands that Kenichi and the other all drop their weapons immediately if they don't want him to stab her right here. They all freeze in place since they don't want Primula to get hurt, but Kenichi has no intention of letting Shaga escape. So while Shaga isn't looking, he buys a laser pointer and tells Miley to fire a shot at Shaga when he gives the signal. Miley gets the message, so Kenichi moves the laser pointer up to Shaga's eye to blind him, and the second he lets go of Primula due to the pain, Miley fires a shot straight into Shaga's shoulder. Kenichi runs up the stairs to get Primula to safety, but Shaga has regained his vision and is getting ready to attack the two of them. Luckily, before he could do anything, the slave girl uses some kind of magic to knock him down the stairs, and once he hits the ground, he is perfectly lined up for Miley to give him a headshot. With that, the group is victorious and Primula is finally safe. So the first thing they do is send Nyanji back to tell Anama of the good news. Next, Kenichi stores his vehicles away and buys some clothes for all the prisoners they rescued, and while they're all cleaning themselves up, he notices the little girl and asks Primula to wash her. And while she's at it, he gives her a pair of scissors to cut her hair. Primula takes one look at the scissors and immediately asks Kenichi if he can sell her some more of these, since it would be a really popular item. But then the other women remind her that she's naked, so she backs away in embarrassment. After everyone gets stressed, Kenichi goes to talk to the little girl and introduces himself to her. She tells him that her name is Anemone, and she has an important letter to hand over. It's a letter docs saying the noble who was funding all of Shaga's kidnappings, and North Pole promises to make sure said noble faces punishment for his crimes. With that, this incident is officially over and it looks like they'll be able to make it back to Dahlia safely. But first, everyone is really tired, so they all live asleep for the night. The story continues. We see in the morning, Kenichi drives everyone back to town, and the people in town are eagerly waiting to see if Kenichi managed to succeed after all. As his truck pulls up to town square, Primula gets out and runs into her father's arms because she's glad to see him again. But while they are having their reunion, Mallow notices that the dress Primula is wearing is of really good quality, so she proudly tells him that Kenichi is the one who gave it to her, and they both have the same idea. Speaking of Kenichi, Mallow still hasn't properly thanked him, so he goes up to Kenichi and tells him he is truly grateful for his help getting Primula back. While he's here, Mallow also asks Kenichi if he managed to recover all the goods from Shaga and his crew, so Kenichi tells Mallow that he put all the loot in his item box. But the loot here isn't what you're expecting, as what Kenichi has in his item box is a bunch of severed heads. Back in the ruins, before Kenichi and the others returned to town, the beast folk told him that he would need to take the heads off all the bandits. Shaga and his crew are pretty infamous, so there's a massive bounty on their heads. But to claim it, Kenichi is going to have to present Shaga's head as proof that he's dead. But all those heads will start smelling pretty bad soon, so it would be much better if Kenichi could store them in his item box. This is definitely one of the more disturbing things Kenichi has had to do, but he has no choice, so he starts loading the heads into his item box. While he's at it, he also collects all the stuff the bandits had stolen, including a bag full of 100 gold coins and a bunch of valuable items. He also ended up bringing all the women that were held prisoner by Shaga, but he's not sure what to do with them. Before they came back to Dahlia, he asked them if they wanted him to take them back to their villages, and some of them say they want to be taken home. But for others, when they were captured, Shaga broke their homes and killed all their family, so they don't really have a home to return to anymore. Kenichi understood their situation, so he invited all of them to come back to Dahlia with him, since they have a better chance at restarting their lives there, and the ladies all seemed thrilled by the idea. Kenichi then turned to Anemone and asked her if she knows her hometown. She tells him that her village is called Orup, but that's quite far from here, like 800 kilometers kind of far, so it'd be a long journey to take her back, but Kenichi is willing to make it happen if she wants to go home. However, Anemone has no intention of returning to that village because she was sold into slavery by her own people. In that case, Kenichi asks her if she would like to come with him to Dahlia, and Anemone excitedly agrees. Kenichi then spends a while driving the women to their various destinations, and once that's done, he heads to the guild with the others to claim the bounty. The guild receptionist freaks out upon seeing a separate head placed in front of her, but there are 50 more where that came from, so Kenichi begins pulling them out of his storage. The guild staff have a lot of work ahead of them because they need to inspect each and every head, and while they do that, Kenichi stands off to the side to take a break. The wizard comes up to Kenichi and tells him that with his strange summoning magic and incredibly large item box, if the nobles ever find out about him, then his life is going to get really troublesome, but that's just even more reason for Kenichi to try and keep a low profile. Speaking of nobles, Norspol walks up to Kenichi and tells him he's going to go meet with the local Lord Asclepius to inform him of the corrupt nobles that were secretly backing Shaga's crime operation, so he's going to be leaving now. Later that night, the guild finally finishes tallying up the reward. It came out to 861 gold coins total, so Kenichi wanted to split it evenly among everyone. However, Anama tells him she doesn't deserve a share since she didn't do anything during the mission. Her life was never in danger, so she doesn't think it would be right for her to get a reward. However, she was hoping Kenichi would do her a small favor. She wants him to let her take care of Anemone as her own because she reminds her of her daughter. Kenichi has no objections to her request since he is sure Anama will take good care of Anemone, so he leaves her to it and goes out into town. Now I'm sure Anama had good intentions when offering to take care of Anemone, but literally a few minutes later she loses the child. Meanwhile, Kenichi heads to Azalea's inn to spend the night since it's too late for him to start heading back out into the forest. He puts out some food for the bobcat to eat and thanks it for protecting him while they were out on their mission. He then heads inside, and as soon as Azalea spots him, she gets really excited because it has been a long time since she last saw him. Azalea heard a rumor about Kenichi taking down a ton of bandits, so she asks him if it's true, but Kenichi denies it because he doesn't want to draw too much attention to himself. That aside, she asks him if he remembers the promise he made to make her his lover once his business becomes successful. But Kenichi says he made no such promise, and more importantly, he wants to know if she has any rooms available for him to stay in, so she tells him his usual room is still available. Kenichi heads upstairs and falls asleep because he's so exhausted, but later on in the night a certain someone sneaks into his room and he can feel her under the covers. He already knows what Azalea wants, but he says he is way too tired for that much activity right now. Even so, Azalea persists and she doesn't get to see Kenichi often, so she gets on top of him and they're about to begin, but then the two notices a child watching them. That pretty much killed the move, so in the end Azalea went back to her room and Anemone ended up spending the night in Kenichi's room. Kenichi figured that Anama would be really worried about Anemone, so he went to her shop to see if she was there, but he couldn't find her, so he decided to just finish up the rest of his errands for the day. He still has a lot of loot from Shaga's camp, so first he heads to the weapons store to sell the swords and shields he got. He then sold the rest of the valuables to Malice Company for 35 gold and took the furniture to the old man's shop for 22 gold. Since the loot is going to be shared evenly, they all end up getting 12 gold from it, and now that that's done, Kenichi thinks it's finally time to head back to his house. Once they arrive, Anemone is amazed by how pretty the place looks, but to her surprise, she finds Anama waiting inside. Anama had been worried sick about Anemone, but she figured Kenichi would find her eventually and bring her to his house, so wait to hear for her. However, Anemone says she wants to live with Kenichi instead of Anama. Anama doesn't understand why she suddenly wants to stay with Kenichi, so she tries to convince Anemone that it would be better to live with her, but Anemone already made up her mind. Anama doesn't want to force her, so she just tells Anemone that she is always welcome to visit her whenever she wants. Anama then heads back to town, and Kenichi turns to return home with Anemone. While walking back, Kenichi asks Anemone why she wants to live with him in the first place, but there's no deep philosophical reason. Kenichi just gave her really tasty food so she likes him more, and then the two take a bath together and get into bed. This new situation is going to take some getting used to, but then again, it wouldn't be strange for him to have a daughter at Anemone's age. Kenichi eventually falls asleep, but as he rests, several cloaked men begin observing his house. Luckily, the suspicious people don't do anything for now, so life goes on as it normally would for Kenichi. 2 weeks go by, and thanks to Norspol's contributions to the battle against Shaga, he was granted the title of Baron, given some land, and rumor has it that he's currently looking for a wife. And in other news, Kenichi showed Mallow and Primula a design for a bicycle a while back, but they laughed in his face because they thought it looked too dumb to be profitable. However, they later came to their senses and realized how good bicycles really are. They apologized to Kenichi for laughing at him earlier, and even offered to pay him 5 gold coins for the idea. Now, bicycles are fairly common in the country, and Kenichi is glad that his idea made such an impact, but he is still feeling a bit uneasy because he can't shake the feeling that someone is watching him. He ignores the feeling for now and heads to the guild so he can receive the final payout for the reward. And once he's got his money, he gives everyone their share. Even though Anama said she didn't want to cut, he still gives her a little money. Anama doesn't think she deserves it, but she says she'll accept his kindness, and in return she gives Anemone an apple. Everything seems to be going well, but Kenichi suddenly gets the feeling that he's being watched again, and this time he's sure he's not imagining things because he sees the person that's spying on him. This could be bad, so he takes Anemone's hand and tries to get out of the area, but he soon realizes he is being followed by more cloaked people. It's backed into a corner, so his only option is to run into the alleyway to get away. However, at the end of the alley, he finds himself blocked in by a carriage. The cloaked men catch up to him and say their boss wants to meet him alive, so if he cooperates with them, it won't have to hurt him. Kenichi doesn't have much of a choice here, so he pretends to comply with their orders, but just before they load him into the carriage, he pulls out some firecrackers from his inventory and throws them at the cloaked men and in the carriage. This provides enough of a distraction for him and Anemone to crawl under the carriage, and now that he has created some distance, he pulls out a crossbow and points it at the men. He threatens to shoot them if they don't leave him alone, and since the kidnappers don't have any long-range weapons of their own, they are forced to flee. Kenichi is relieved that he managed to get away, and a few moments later Malo shows up in his carriage because he heard the commotion. He offers to give Kenichi and Anemone a ride, and while riding together, Kenichi tells him all about what happened. He believes this must have been the work of a noble that is part of the anti-monarchy faction, and he suggests that Kenichi go to meet with the local Lord Asclepius so he can get some protection. Kenichi agrees that it may be a good idea, but he doesn't want to risk it since Asclepius might ask him to start paying taxes, and he hates taxes, so he decides it might be better to just leave the city altogether. After returning home, Malo tells Primula about Kenichi's decision to leave town, and Primula is upset because they haven't even gotten to properly thank Kenichi for everything he did for them. The bicycles were such a popular item that the local lord granted them a family name because of it, and as such they owe Kenichi a great debt, so they can't let him leave until that debt has been repaid. That is why Primula has decided that she will leave town with him and spend as much time with Kenichi as possible. She already tried to gain his affection once before, and he rejected her. But when she was kidnapped, Kenichi didn't think twice about risking his life to save her, so Primula is sure that he must care about her deeply. And if that's true, then he will definitely wait to see her before leaving town. Well, it looks like Kenichi didn't care about her as much as she thought because he's gone along with his entire house. Meanwhile, Kenichi is riding on his new motorcycle, and I guess he must be confident in his riding skills because he bought a helmet for Anemone and not for himself. While riding, he ends up coming across a familiar face, so he pulls up next to Fuyu and greets him. It has been a while since he last saw Fuyu, so the two stop to chat a little, and Fuyu learns that Kenichi became a merchant after all. He also finds out that Kenichi was the one behind the bicycle invention. He now has a daughter and is currently traveling, but he is curious about where they are heading. Kenichi explains that he and his new family are going on a journey, although he doesn't know where they are going exactly. Fuyu wishes them good luck on their journey, so Kenichi and the others get back on the bike and continue riding off into the distance. The story continues. We see Kenichi and Anemone have been traveling for a long time at this point, so they are roughly 100 kilometers away from Dahlia, but they are only 6 kilometers away from the next town, Astrantia. In the meantime, he's been camping out with Anemone and making all sorts of tasty meals, so this is pretty close to the slow life he has always wanted. However, since he has Anemone with him for her sake, he wants to find a place to settle down soon. To help him locate the next town, Kenichi buys a drone and flies it into the air to scout out the area. He finds out that this river leads down to a lake, and Astrantia must be on the other side, so he takes Anemone and the bobcat and starts riding downstream. They eventually arrive at this spot with a really nice view of the lake, so Kenichi lets Anemone and the bobcat play in the water a little, and since this area looks so good, he decides to set up his new house here. After clearing out a bunch of the vegetation, Kenichi pulls his house out of his item box. While he's setting things up, he realizes that he never gave the bobcat a name, so he spends a few minutes thinking about what he should call it, and eventually comes up with the name Vil. That night he begins giving Anemone lessons on reading and writing, and she's pretty smart, so she figures it out pretty quickly. But when it comes to math, she struggles a little. While Anemone is racking her brain to figure out the math problems, Kenichi takes a look at his store window to see if there's any way for him to get diesel cheap. Till now, he has been using kerosene and additives to make his own diesel, but he remembers watching a show that said he can make biodiesel from cooking oil, but he doesn't really understand how that works, so he decides to buy a couple of books on the topic. While he's reading, Anemone finishes her homework and asks Kenichi if she can read with him. Kenichi tells her she won't be able to understand it because the book is written in the language of his homeland, but Anemone says she wants to learn the language too. Since she wants to learn it so badly, Kenichi buys a children's book for Anemone and she immediately gets to work studying it. Next on Kenichi's agenda, he starts setting up some camouflage for his house so it doesn't stick out so much, and while he is doing that, he hears some rustling in the bushes. He is put on edge since that sound could mean there's a monster nearby, so he loads his crossbow and prepares to attack anything that comes after him. But to his surprise, the source of the noise turns out to be Miley. She was devastated when Kenichi disappeared without telling her, so she worked hard to track his scent and followed him all the way here. And now that she's here, she has nowhere else to go, so she says she will be living with Kenichi from now on. Kenichi doesn't really mind, and Anemone seems to get along great with Miley, so it is agreed that Miley will live with them. And while having dinner, Kenichi asks her if any interesting things have happened since he left Dahlia. Miley doesn't think much has happened, but she does recall hearing that Norspol proposed to Primula, so they are going to get married soon. Kenichi is glad that Primula managed to move on and get engaged to a nice guy like Norspol, but he can't attend the wedding since he's so far away now. Later that night, he gets in the bath with Anemone as usual, while Miley washes herself beside them, and once everyone has dried off, they head back inside. Anemone shows Miley the Japanese book Kenichi gave to her, and she really likes it because even though she can't read the words, the pictures make the book easy to understand. Hearing her say that gives Kenichi an idea. Since books are really precious in this world, he could probably make a lot of profit by selling picture books here. Although, the stories from Japan probably won't appeal to the people of this world, so Kenichi asks Anemone and Miley if they know any local legends. They are both excited to hear this since they know a ton of old legends, but one in particular stands out to Kenichi, so he asks them to tell him more about the forest elf legend. Kenichi thinks the story is really good, so he immediately gets to work drawing illustrations for it, and once he has finished drawing, he buys an ink press and uses it to create more copies. He then gifts the February 1st copies of the book to Miley and Anemone, and the girls love their books so much. However, while they are looking at the pictures, Kenichi notices a boat approaching and this could mean trouble, so he tells the girls to head back inside for now. As the boat approaches the shore, Kenichi points his crossbow at the man aboard and demands to know why they are here. The man tells Kenichi to calm down because he's not here to cause any trouble. He's from the village of Sentanka, and after seeing that someone moved in on the other side of the lake, they decided to come take a closer look to make sure that there weren't any bandits here. This gets Kenichi to calm down a little, so he lowers his crossbow and explains that he's a merchant that just moved in. Just then, Vel comes over to Kenichi and the beast folk is shocked since bobcats normally never get attached to people, so for Kenichi to have befriended one means he must be a good guy. Crouton decides to take the beast man's word for it, so he introduces himself to Kenichi and the beast man does the same. Kenichi decides to show Crouton and Nyanyas around his house to prove that he isn't doing anything dangerous and everything looks pretty normal, so Crouton apologizes for the intrusion and then prepares to leave. But before he does, he notices the books Kenichi made on the table, and asks if Kenichi would let him buy lunch together, and afterwards, Anemone spends some time reading to him, and since Anemone is occupied at the moment, she can't bring himself to refuse, so stuff happens again. Unfortunately, the hazmat suit he was wearing made him incredibly sweaty, so he had to take a break and jump in the river. Once he gets back to work, we find out that Kenichi has been working on synthesizing biodiesel from cooking oil, and even though it is very dangerous, if Kenichi manages to pull this off, he will be able to make diesel for himself without spending a fortune. Now comes the risky part, testing the fuel. He pumps some into the generator and fortunately doesn't explode, so Kenichi's experiment was a success. Next on the agenda is visiting the town of Estrantia, so Kenichi soon heads out with Miley and Anemone in town. Their first stop upon entering the city is the Adventurers Guild, since Kenichi needs to register. They walk inside and head to the receptionist's desk, but as they greet the receptionist, there are two big things Kenichi can't keep his eyes off. After snapping out of his trance, Kenichi tells the receptionist that he wants to register with the city's Adventurers Guild and Merchant Guild, and Miley registers as an adventurer here as well. The receptionist takes their IDs and heads to the back rooms to process the registration, but when she comes back, she's a bit flustered because she just saw Kenichi's file and realizes that he's the one who defeated Shaga. Kenichi tells her to stop yelling because he's trying to keep a low profile. The receptionist quickly understands, so she tells him his registration is complete and he can go on with his day as usual. After leaving the guild, they all sit down in town square to have a meal. But since spices in this country are still controlled by the Spice Syndicate, all the food here is his tasteless prison slop. Anemone and Miley clearly aren't enjoying their food, so Kenichi gives them a little bit of his spice blend to add a little flavor. Just then, Kenichi notices a couple of thugs with JoJo hair prowling around, and it definitely looks like they are up to no good. But if it doesn't involve Kenichi, then he's going to mind his own business. At the same time, he notices Crouton and a little girl walk into an alleyway, and something is clearly going on, but again, it's not Kenichi's problem. He carries on with his sightseeing and comes across an old magic shop that looks interesting, so he heads inside. But he finds an old lady running the shop, and while looking around, he notices a magic device on display, so he asks her what it does. Granny is more than happy to demonstrate its function, so she pours some water into one compartment and a lot of wine into the other. And as a result, all the water is separated out of the wine. The first thing that comes to Kenichi's mind after seeing this is that he can use it to produce his diesel without having to shave years off his life from chemical inhalation. He tells Granny he wants to buy the magic device, and she's shocked because no one ever actually offers to buy anything here. But Kenichi is a paying customer, so how could she refuse? It looks like Anemone also found something she likes because she shows Kenichi a book she picked up. Granny explains that the book is a grimoire, and as soon as Kenichi hears that, he says he wants to buy the book as well. He can't guarantee that you will be able to use it, since you need a certain level of magic power to actually use magic. After purchasing the book, he immediately wants to start reading it with Anemone, but Granny stops them because grimoires need to be registered before customer is allowed to take, so Kenichi will have to come back for it in a week. Kenichi is fine with waiting, so he and the others leave to continue looking around town. However, they end up bumping into Nianyas outside. Nianyas is surprised to see them, but he's in quite a hurry so he doesn't have time to chat. Kenichi has a bad feeling that he's about to get mixed up in something troublesome, so he wants everyone to head home, but before they could, the group spots Crouton being attacked in the alleyway with his daughter. Kenichi can't ignore it this time, so he is forced to help, but first he buys a plague doctor mask to hide his identity from the thugs. The thugs have a major grudge against Crouton, and they were fully prepared to kill him and his daughter, but before they could, Kenichi appears behind them and starts throwing fireworks. He declares that the fireworks are one of his many magic spells, and since the thugs have never seen anything like it before, they all run away scared. After making sure the man is alright, Crouton sits down by the fountain and tells Kenichi the whole story. Back when Crouton used to work as a government official, he worked hard and arrested a bunch of members of the spy syndicate, and ever since, they've been targeting him. Crouton's daughter asks if Kenichi and the others are his friends, so Crouton explains that he met Kenichi a few days ago and he's the one who made the book he bought for her. Mary gets excited after hearing that her favorite book was made by Kenichi, so she starts thanking him for it. But Anemone gets a little jealous, so she mentions that she helped make the book as well, so Mary thanks her as well and asks if they can make a book together sometime, and Anemone says she would love to. Kenichi is glad to see that Anemone finally has a friend the same age as her, and a few days later, Crouton and his wife brought Mary to visit Kenichi and Anemone. This is the first time they had guests, so Kenichi prepared a meal for all of them to enjoy, and from there it became a daily thing for all of them to hang out with each other while Mary and Anemone played together. However, one day Mary didn't show up like she usually does. Instead, a desperate Crouton came begging Kenichi for his help. He tells Kenichi that Mary got sick with one of this nation's diseases, and most children who contracted don't even survive one night, so he needs to do something to help her soon. He is willing to pay every coin he owns if it means Mary will survive, but he can't afford to hire a mage to cast healing magic on her, so Kenichi is his only hope. Kenichi isn't going to just stand by while Anemone's friend is suffering, so he hands Crouton a pack of painkillers and tells him to give it to Mary to reduce her fever. And hopefully he mentions something about the dosage too. While the painkillers will help with Mary's fever, they won't cure her, so Kenichi races off to go call the magic granny for help. Later that night, they all meet at Crouton's house to see Mary, and Granny can immediately tell that Mary is sick with something called chicory fever. It is treatable, but it requires the seeds of a special flower that only grows out in the forest. Someone needs to go get those seeds before morning, so Kenichi, Crouton, and Nianyas all head out to retrieve them. But as they leave, we find out that the Spy Syndicate thugs were watching the whole thing, and they are definitely going to try something now that Kenichi and Crouton are gone. The story continues. We see Kenichi and the others soon arrive at the river where the chicory flower seeds can be found, so he pulls out an inflatable raft and rows out into the water so he can get a seed. It doesn't take long for him to find a bunch of the flowers, so he picks one of the flower seeds and hands it to Crouton, who is incredibly thankful for all his help. But they haven't completed their mission yet because they still need to get this seed back to Mary so she can be cured, and they've got another problem on their hands. Nianyas senses something approaching and it turns out to be a pack of black wolves, but it's too late to retreat because they've already been surrounded. Kenichi has dealt with the black wolves before, so he buys 2 swords and hands them to Crouton and Nianyas. What's important right now is that Mary gets that medicine, so he tells them to run back to the house as fast as they can while he holds the wolves off. He then begins throwing fireworks to get the wolves' attention and lead them away from Crouton, but a small group of wolves breaks off from the pack and corners Crouton and Nianyas. Kenichi realizes Crouton and Nianyas are in danger, so he rushes back over to help as quickly as he can. But while he's doing that, we see those thugs from earlier hiding behind the trees, and they seem to be controlling the wolves with some kind of whistle. The wolves proceed to attack Nyanya's and Crouton, so the two fights back with the swords Kenichi gave them. The thugs are pissed that Crouton is somehow managing to survive, but all their malice allowed Vel to sense their presence, so she wastes no time in knocking all the thugs to the ground. Vel then starts attacking the dogman, causing him to drop his whistle, and as he does so, all the wolves stop attacking Crouton. Kenichi sees this and realizes that the thugs must have been controlling the wolves all along, and since the dogman lost his whistle, he tells Nyanya's to take Crouton and get out of here while he has the chance. The dogman manages to get Vel off and grabs his whistle to order the wolves to go after Crouton, but the wolves seem to be too scared to move. None of them have any idea what's going on, but all of a sudden a massive bear appears. Wolves realizes just how much danger they're in, so they flee the forest, and the first one to fall victim to the bear's rampage is the dogman, and after hitting the ground, he definitely looks dead. The bear then switches its target and goes after Kenichi instead, but Vel stands in its way and then proceeds to scratch up the bear's face. Kenichi thanks Vel for the help and then pulls out more fireworks to try and scare off the bear. This is 10 times the usual amount, so Kenichi is sure it will get the beast off his tracks. But to his surprise, the bear actually eats the fireworks, resulting in a massive explosion inside its mouth. While the bear is still stunned from all the fireworks, Kenichi takes the opportunity to bring down this heavy machinery and whack the bear in the face to finish it off. Now that the bear is dead, Kenichi stores his body in his inventory as well as his backhoe, and he's glad he made it out of that fight alive, but he still had to think about what to do with the unconscious dogman. A little while later, Kenichi returns to Crouton's house to see if Mary is doing better, and thanks to the medicine he got, she's going to make a full recovery, so Crouton and his wife are deeply grateful to Kenichi. Kenichi isn't the type to go around saving others, but he has to admit that helping out her made him feel pretty good about himself. Just then, he remembers that he has something important to discuss with Crouton, so he asks to speak with him privately for a minute. The two of them head outside, and Kenichi tells Crouton that he managed to make a deal with the dogman in the woods. He bandaged the dogman up so he wouldn't die of his wounds, and in exchange, he had the dogman promise that he would never harm Crouton or his family again. The dogman agreed to the terms, although he has no control over what the rest of the thugs do, since there are a lot of them who hold major grudges against Crouton, so they will surely continue coming after him, although it might be a different story if Crouton were to leave this town. Kenichi tells Crouton that it might be a good idea to leave this town since it would ensure that no one comes after him or his family again. Crouton admits that leaving would be the best option, but he literally has nowhere to go, and he can't go to Dahlia since the Spice Syndicate operates over there as well. Kenichi thinks about it for a minute and comes up with a good solution to Crouton's dilemma. Kenichi happens to know a knight named Norsepol, who just became a baron, and as such he is currently recruiting people to live on his lands. So if Kenichi writes a letter to Norsepol telling him all about how great Crouton is, then he would be sure to let Crouton move in. The next day, Kenichi finally returns home and tells the others what happened while he was gone, but Miley is upset because he went on such an amazing adventure without telling her. Kenichi says there was no time to come get Miley, plus he needed someone to look after Anemone while he was gone, so there's no way Miley could have gone with him. A few days later, Crouton and his family finally decide to move away for their safety, so Crouton heads to Norsepol's territory first to set things up, while Mary and her mother wait behind because Mary still hasn't fully recovered yet. While Kenichi and Miley are taking a walk outside, Miley catches the scent of blood, and that's when she notices a dogman behind a tree. Kenichi recognizes him as the same one from a few days ago, so he asks him what he's doing here, and the dogman simply states that he made a promise not to harm Crouton, so he was just tying up some loose ends to make sure no other thugs go after him. After all, dogmen always keep their promises. However, after his murderous binge, the dogman can't exactly stay in this city anymore, so he's going to be leaving as well. Later that day, Kenichi heads into town to sell the bear he killed at the guild. The man in charge of dissection is amazed that Kenichi was able to defeat a tusk bear on his own, but Kenichi says he just got lucky. Anyway, he would like to keep the meat and the magic stone on the bear to himself, and he wants to sell the rest to the guild. The man says he understands, but with how big the bear is, it's going to take him a long time to finish dissecting it, so he asks Kenichi to come back in the evening. Kenichi is fine with waiting a little, and since it's still only midday, he decides to head home and finish up one of his projects. But as he walks past a shop, there's a familiar face inside, and it seems like she's looking for someone important to her. Back at Kenichi's house, he finally gets around to using that artifact he bought to make his biodiesel, and after a lot of chemistry that would probably blow your house up if you tried it, Kenichi is finally able to create what he believes to be pure diesel for his engines. Now the only way to know for sure if it worked is to test out his generator, and when he turns it on, the generator doesn't explode, so his experiment was a success. With this method, he was able to make a liter of diesel for only 300 yen, as opposed to the 3,000 yen per liter he was spending before this, so that artifact was a great purchase. Now that that's done, Kenichi leaves out some food for Miley and Anemone because he is heading back into town to pick up a few things. First, he heads to the old woman's shop to see if his grimoire is finally ready, and thankfully she's done with all the registration procedures so Kenichi can have his grimoire. Kenichi takes a look at the book and he's surprised to see that it has a magic stone embedded in it, so the woman explains that the incantation recorded in the grimoire is linked to that magic stone, so without it, the spell won't activate. Kenichi doesn't really understand what she means, but he plans to figure out the whole magic thing later anyway. Next on his agenda, he heads to the Adventurers Guild to pick up his items, and when he arrives, everything is already packed up and ready to go, so he puts it in his storage. He then heads to the front desk to collect his payment for the parts he sold to the guild, but Kenichi could hardly focus on the money with those two melons dangling in front of him. He finally snaps out of it and collects his money before leaving the guild, but as he is walking down the street, he hits a strange feeling like someone is watching him. It turns out that Kenichi's feeling was spot on, because he was being watched by someone and it turns out to be Primula. He is shocked to see her and asks what she's doing all the way out here, but Primula asks him how he could have been so cruel as to leave without her. Kenichi tries to explain that the only reason he left Dahlia was because of the nobles trying to capture him, but Primula still thinks Kenichi should have at least said goodbye to her. Kenichi can tell that this outburst is causing quite a scene, so he asks Primula if they can continue this discussion somewhere more private. Primula takes him to the hotel she's staying at and begins yelling at Kenichi again for leaving without giving her a chance to repay him for all the things he has done for her. Kenichi doesn't really think he did that much, but Primula reminds him that he saved her life, so she owes him a huge debt of gratitude. Kenichi is starting to get a little uncomfortable, so he changes topics and mentions how he heard rumors about Primula getting married to Norspol. However, while there were certainly discussions about it, Primula ultimately turned down the engagement, but that's beside the point. Primula says she's not going home unless Kenichi agrees to go with her, but Kenichi has no intentions of leaving, so Primula says she will just stay here with him then. Kenichi can tell that she's not bluffing, so he doesn't have many options here, but still, he's surprised that she managed to find out that he was living in this city. Primula explains that after Kenichi left, she spent every day stalking the guild registry to see if Kenichi's name would pop up somewhere in another city. And sure enough, she found his name one day on an updated registry, so she immediately got on a carriage and headed straight here. And now that she has found him again, she gets straight to the point and asks Kenichi to give her the most devious backshots known to man tonight. Kenichi is taken aback, but he sees how serious Primula is, so he agrees and the two of them head up to her room. As soon as they get up to the room, Primula begins taking off all of her clothes because she can't wait any longer, and you know what happened from there. The next morning, Kenichi returns to his house with Primula, and at first Anemone and Miley were really excited to see him, but that excitement quickly faded when they saw Primula, and Primula gets upset because she thinks Kenichi left her behind but chose to bring Miley with him. Kenichi tells her that he didn't choose to bring Miley just tracked him down on her own. The only one he chose to bring with him was Anemone, but is Primula really going to let herself be jealous of the child? Kenichi makes a good point, so Primula calms down for now and Anemone makes Kenichi promise that he won't bring back any other women, and this gets Primula upset again because she thinks Kenichi has been bringing women home. Later that night, Kenichi gets a bath ready, but when it's time to get in, all the girls say they want to get in with him. He doesn't want to have to deal with this, so he decides to just buy a second barrel so there are 2 baths. Once everyone is done with their baths, Kenichi sets up a blow dryer, and after everyone's dry, he sits down at the table to try out the grimoire. He reads the incantations for a fireball spell, but as he completes the spell, his fears are confirmed because nothing happened. This means he has no magic power and he just wasted a ton of money on a book he can't use. He starts thinking of ways to sell the grimoire so he can make some of his money back, but while he was distracted, Anemone picked it up and started reading it. Only this time something is actually happening. It looks like Anemone possesses quite a bit of magic power because she was able to cast the fireball perfectly on her first try. Too bad they're in a log cabin though. The story continues. We see Kenichi panics and immediately buys several fire extinguishers to put out the fire, and once that's done, he goes to check on Anemone. She starts apologizing for causing so much trouble, but Kenichi isn't worried about his scorched cabin. He's much more amazed that Anemone was able to use magic. But all of a sudden, Anemone passes out, so everyone gets worried. They carry her into bed, and thankfully, by the next morning, Her fever had begun to settle down, so Kenichi gives her a can of peaches to help raise her blood sugar. Everyone else has some peaches as well, and Primula is surprised by how much sugar there is in this, since nobles have a complete monopoly on sugar in the country. Anemone was fine after a little bed rest, so a few days later, when Mary had finally recovered fully from the chicory fever, Kenichi invited her over for a barbecue. He still has a lot of wild boar meat on hand, so he figured this would be a good way to get rid of it, and sharing a hunt with close friends is the exact kind of quiet life activity he has been hoping for. Kenichi is proud that his cooking skills are appreciated, so he decides to blow everyone's mind with a new bear curry recipe he came up with. As they all try the soup, they are astonished because bear meat is usually tough and stinky, but this dish makes it unbelievably good. As the day goes on, Mary and Anemone play together, and Kenichi helps the two of them make their very own picture books. But this is the first time Primula is seeing the picture books, so she asks Kenichi about it. Kenichi explains that it's just a book with images to tell a story, and after a brief moment of thought, Primula identifies a target audience for the book and is already making plans to expand sales all the way to the royal capital. She asks Kenichi for permission to these pictures books because she wants to start a business in Estrantia, and Kenichi is fine with giving her a couple of books, but he asks her what else she's going to sell. Primula has already thought of this, so she tells him she can sell those canned peaches Kenichi has and the bear stew he made. Both are really tasty, so she's sure it will sell out in no time, but they're going to need someone to help with service, so Mary's mother offers to work for them. After all, she would feel guilty if she didn't do something to help after everything Kenichi has done for her and her family. Besides, Primula is still new to Estrantia, so it would be good to have someone around who is familiar with the area. Mary also offers to help since she's old enough to start working now, and since everyone is going to be working at the new stall, Anemone doesn't want to be left out, so she says she'll work there too. The next day, Primula wants to get to work right away, so Kenichi takes her to the city gate and buys a food cart for her to use. As the day goes on, the food cart starts to pick up steam as customers begin filing in from all over the place. Unfortunately, with all the attention they were getting, they also ended up attracting a couple of scammers who put a bug in their bowl and then accused Primula of serving them bug-infested food. While all that was going on, Kenichi is busy doing some land surveying with his drone, and from the looks of it, the forest on top of that hill is completely untouched, so he is sure he will find a lot of medicinal herbs and forest veggies, but he wasn't expecting to find a ton of gemstones embedded in the rock. He's never seen gems of this color before, so he's not sure what they are, but he's convinced that they have to be valuable, so it looks like he's going to become a miner soon. But that will have to be a project for another day because he needs to head back into town to pick Primula and the others up. Kenichi rides into town on his bike and finds them waiting with all their stuff packed up. Primula excitedly tells him that they managed to sell out entirely on their first day, and Kenichi is glad to hear it, but he notices a new beast woman standing with them, so he asks who she is. Primula starts telling him about what happened earlier that day and how two guys were trying to blackmail with a bug, but before things got out of hand, Naomina showed up and told everyone that those two guys are scammers. She saw them when they put the bug in the food, and Naomina doesn't like scammers, so she's going to deal with the problem. The scammers got scared and ran off after that, so Primula decided to hire Naomina as her bodyguard for the rest of the day. Kenichi thanks Naomina for being such a huge help, but Naomina tells him it's no big deal. And if anything, she feels lucky to have met Primula because she got paid a silver coin to basically glare at people who cause trouble. The group heads back to Kenichi's house together, and upon returning, Miley and Anemone come out to greet Kenichi. But Miley becomes hostile when she sees that Kenichi came home with a new woman. Kenichi explains that Naomina is just a bodyguard that Primula hired, and she's only here because Primula wanted to treat her to dinner. Miley is fine with it as long as Naomina doesn't become another competitor for Kenichi's affection, so they all head inside to have dinner. Naomina gets to try some of Kenichi's bear meat stew, and she's amazed that bear meat tastes so good. The only thing that would make this better is if she had some wine to go with the meal. And as luck would have it, Kenichi does have some wine, so he pours Naomina a glass and she practically melts in satisfaction. Kenichi asks her if she would like to take a bath once she's done eating, and Naomina perks up in excitement after hearing that she can have a hot bath. And since the baths are going to be used, Anemone offers to heat them up. They head outside and Anemone proceeds to cast her fireball spell to set the bath drum on fire and heat it up instantly. She then does it again for the second drum and everyone is impressed with how good she is at using magic now. They all then take their baths and dry off in front of Kenichi's blow dryer, and once they are done they get dressed for bed. Naomina has been loving to hear so much that she is considering moving in permanently, but Miley is strictly against the idea because there are already too many women here as it is. They then notice Kenichi in the middle of a lesson with an Emin, so they ask him what he's up to, and Kenichi explains that he is teaching an Emin some basic writing and math to help broaden her horizons. It's pretty difficult to make a living for yourself in this world if you don't have an education, so Kenichi wants an Emin to learn as much as possible while she still can. He asks her if she would be willing to go with Primula and the others next time they head into town with the food cart, so she can learn about the business, but she says she would rather learn more magic so she can stay with Kenichi. The next day, Primula and the others head back into town to continue the food cart business, and it's just as popular as it was yesterday, but with Naomina as their bodyguard, they don't have to worry about any chronically unemployed troublemakers causing a scene. As for Kenichi, he just finished creating a scaffolding with the help of Miley and an Emin, and he plans to start excavating the gemstones as soon as he can, but it's getting pretty late, so he will have to come back tomorrow. As he is packing everything up, Primula approaches Kenichi and asks him how he always has such useful stuff inside his item box, but Kenichi tells her it's a secret. There are some things he can't tell her, no matter how much she asks, and he's aware that that makes him sound suspicious, but she's just going to have to put up with it. He then kisses her, but Naomina tells Kenichi to stop with all the romance causes, reminding her of how single she is. The next day, the group returns to the plateau, and after Kenichi has cleared out a bit of the vegetation, they all begin searching around for all sorts of interesting plants. While the others forage through the bushes, Kenichi gets to work carving out the mountainside to get some of those gems. And when he finally pops one loose, he tosses it into his item box to have it appraised, and it turns out that the gems are worth 200,000 yen each, and there are a lot of them, so Kenichi practically hit the jackpot. After a long day of lucrative gem mining, the group heads home and Kenichi starts working on dinner. He has something special in mind, so he has the girls help him grind some of the bear meat down, and then teaches them how to wrap the gyoza, but Miley and Naomina can't help with this step because of all their fur. Once all the pieces have been folded, Kenichi puts them in a pan to cook, and eventually the gyoza is ready to be eaten. They are all in love with the flavor and texture of the gyoza, especially with this yellow sauce Kenichi prepared for it, so Kenichi tells them that the yellow sauce is mayonnaise. Naomina has heard of mayo before because it's really popular in the Empire right now. Apparently a mage created it using magic, so Primula asks Kenichi if he used magic to create his mayonnaise, but Kenichi tells her he just made it with eggs. Primula is shocked to hear that something as amazing as mayo can be made without magic, so she asks Kenichi to show her how to make it, but he doesn't want to do that right now, so he tells her to wait a bit. In that case, Primula asks him if he will let her sell his gyoza recipe at her food stall tomorrow. Kenichi says he is fine with it, but making the gyoza is a lot of work, so he's not sure Primula will be able to handle it. However, Primula tells him that won't be a problem because she can just hire more workers. Kenichi is impressed by how proactive Primula is being, so he offers to show her one more of his recipes. He tells everyone to follow him outside because he has something special to show them. He quickly deuces the meat and some alcohol, causing a huge fireball to form, and once he's done grilling the steak, he gives Naomina a bite. Naomina goes silent after taking her first bite, so Kenichi asks her if there's something wrong with the steak, but on the contrary, she went silent because the steak is simply too perfect, but it has a strange smell on it. Kenichi explains that the scent is probably from the liquor he used to marinate the steak, but as soon as he mentions liquor, Naomina pounces on him and starts asking for a drink. Kenichi eventually agrees to let her drink a little, but he warns her that this stuff is pretty strong, so she should pace herself, but Naomina completely ignores him and downs the whole glass in one gulp. She immediately gets drunk and starts hugging Kenichi as thanks for the liquor, but Miley can see where this is going, so she pulls Naomina by the hair to get her off Kenichi. Naomina tries to assure Miley that she's not trying to steal Kenichi away from her. She just wants him to let her live in the shed, so she can share tasty meals with him and the others. Miley still doesn't trust her, but Kenichi doesn't see the harm in letting Naomina live here, especially since she is Primula's bodyguard. Primula says she is fine with Naomina living here as well since all she wants is food, so she definitely won't try to seduce Kenichi when no one is around. A little while later, when no one is around, Kenichi shows Naomina the room he set up for her, so she asks him how much she has to pay his rent. Kenichi tells her she doesn't need to pay rent because as long as she keeps helping Primula out, then she doesn't have to worry about paying him rent. He then tries to leave, but Naomina pulls him back and says she can pay him back in a different way. However, Miley could sense the seduction in here from a mile away, so she bursts through the door and enters the room to join in. A month passes and Kenichi continues his mining operation, making around 15 million yen from the stones so far, but that's almost nothing compared to Primula's stall because it's steadily expanded into a company called Corolla with tons of employees. It now has a daily income of over 200,000 yen, so we're looking at an annual income of over 100 million yen. Kenichi still finds it hard to believe that Primula was able to build all this from the ground up in a month, but her success is largely due to Kenichi's wonderful products. Kenichi is just glad he was able to spend the last few weeks doing his own thing because it has been really relaxing for him. He wishes he could continue living a quiet life just like this, but it looks like he's going to have a troublesome guest show up soon, because word of his achievements has reached the royal castle and the princess seems particularly interested in meeting him. The story continues. We see Primula get summoned up to the castle to meet with Lady Eupatorium. Eupatorium is rather impressed with how well Primula has done for herself after only being in the city for a few weeks. And while Primula is busy with her meeting, Kenichi decides to head back to the magic shop to see if there's anything useful he can buy. While there, he spots an explosion magic grimoire, and he recalls how the old man used it back when they fought Shuga, so he immediately offered to buy it. And as a little bonus for being such a good customer, the shop lady gave him a household spell book for free. After everyone gets home, Primula fills Kenichi in on the details of her meeting with Eupatorium, and basically she wants to buy a brooch from Kenichi because she saw another noblewoman with one, so now she needs to get one too. Kenichi doesn't mind since it's more business for him, so he pulls a brooch out of his storage, and by chance the engraving on the brooch happens to look a lot like Eupatorium. So Kenichi tells Primula to say it was custom made because that will get Eupatorium to pay a higher price. After dinner, Kenichi heads outside, but before he can start working on anything, Miley asks him if he wants to come to a dungeon with her. Kenichi had no idea that dungeons existed in this world, so he is really excited to go, and so is Anemone. Kenichi tries to convince Anemone to stay behind since dungeons aren't safe for a child like her, but Anemone insists, so Kenichi eventually agrees to have her tag along. They soon arrive at the base of a cliff, so Kenichi gets everyone some headlamps and they all head in. They don't run into any monsters, but they do find some shiny rocks in the wall, and Kenichi instantly hears the sound of money rolling into his bank account, so he pulls out his generator and drill to get to work. It's insanely loud in the cave, but who needs hearing when you're gonna be rich? Although he doesn't want Anemone to go deaf in her teens, so he asks Miley to take her a safe distance away to avoid the noise. Miley is about to do that, but all of a sudden she senses something nearby, so she warns Kenichi of the incoming threat. It turns out to be a medium-sized Australian spider, and personally I would have started running by now, but Kenichi pulls out his crossbow and prepares to fight. The spider seems to be stuck in the right crawl space, so Miley tells Kenichi they have to kill it before it escapes. Kenichi fires a shot at the spider with his crossbow, but the arrow pretty much bounces off the spider's exoskeleton. Miley then fires a shot of her own, but she aims for the spider's eyes, and this time it manages to do damage. It looks like the spider's eyes are its weak point, so Kenichi tells Anemone to use her fire magic to target its eyes. Unfortunately, Anemone is paralyzed in fear, so she's not going to be of much use against this thing. The spider manages to make it past the crawl space and starts firing webs to capture Anemone, but luckily Miley grabs her and dodges the spider webs. Things are getting really bad, so Kenichi throws some firecrackers at the spider and distracts it, and summons his bike so he and the others can escape. He then drives as fast as he can until they make it out of the cave, and thankfully it doesn't look like the spider is chasing them, so Kenichi drives straight home. After getting back, Kenichi tells Nyamina and Primula about what happened, and Nyamina is upset that she didn't get invited to go on such an exciting adventure. She blames Miley for leaving her out, but Kenichi tells her not to get so mad because he's planning to bring her along when he returns. After all, he still needs to go back to the cave because he left his generator there, and there are still a lot of valuable gems in the cave, so he's hoping to mine some more. Nyamina is technically supposed to be guarding Primula while she works, but Primula says she's planning to take a break for the next few days, so Nyamina is free to do whatever she wants. While the girls are all drying themselves off, Kenichi recalls that he bought an explosion grimoire, so he asks Anemone if she would like to try it out. Anemone excitedly runs over to the table so she can start practicing, but before she finishes the chant, Kenichi stops her because he doesn't want the house to explode. He tells her he's glad she's excited, but she can try the spell out later, preferably far from the house. Nyamina then offers to teach Anemone everything there is to know about being an adventurer, and the next day they begin practicing to take down the spider. Once all their stuff is ready, Kenichi asks Anemone if she's sure she wants to go back in, and she tells him she's perfectly fine, so they all head in together. After walking through the cave for a bit, they arrive at the spot where they got attacked by the spider. Kenichi finds his generator and jackhammer on the floor nearby, and he recalls that the spider showed up as soon as he started using this thing, so he powers it up and starts hammering away at the gem to lure out the spider. A few seconds later, the spider emerges from the hole, so Kenichi summons several cans of insecticide and has everyone aim straight for the spider. And once it has been hit with a good amount of poison, Kenichi tells Anemone to use her fire magic on it. Anemone does, as instructed this time, shoots a fireball straight at the spider, lighting it on fire and forcing the spider to retreat. Everyone congratulates Anemone for doing such a good job, but they still need to finish the spider off, so they follow it through the tunnel and eventually find the spider sitting in an open cavern. They aren't letting it get away, so they all start spraying it with even more insecticide, and that finally kills the spider, but the group has even bigger issues to deal with. Specifically, the massive spider in the corner of the caverns just woke up. This one is female, so it's 5 times the size of the male one they just killed, but that means it's too big to fit through the passage. As long as they can make it out, it'll probably die of starvation, but before they could escape, the spider blocks off the exit. If the spider attacks them as they are now, they are done for, so Vel steps up and runs across the spider's legs to claw out its eye. And now that it's blind, it can't attack them anymore, so Kenichi tells everyone to unload all their spray cans on it. He then asks Anemone to use her fire magic on the spider, so she does, but even though it sets the spider on fire, it doesn't actually do much damage. Kenichi assumes the spider must have some kind of resistance to magic, but even if that's the case, he has no idea why the spider isn't attacking them. Naomina explains that since they've already blinded the spider and Oza can't kill them, so it probably intends to block the exit with his body until everyone in here starves to death. Kenichi is pissed that the spider would try using such a dirty tactic, but since they aren't in any immediate danger, he takes a moment to go grab the other spider corpse from across the cave. While he was doing that, Naomina and Miley were busy spraying as much insecticide on the spider as possible. But no matter how many cans they use, that thing just won't go down. They are running out of options, so Kenichi decides to take drastic measures and buys a piece of heavy machinery, an excavator. Naomina is shocked by what she's seeing and asks what this thing is supposed to be, so Anemone explains that Kenichi can summon these things to help him fight. As Kenichi is climbing into the control box of the excavator, Anemone tells him she wants to ride with him, and she won't take no for an answer, so Kenichi allows her to ride with him just this once. He charges at the spider with the excavator and tries to strike it with a shovel, but the spider grabs onto it and starts trying to climb the excavator over. Fortunately, Kenichi is able to regain control and throws the spider to the ground. He then tries to finish the spider off by crushing it with a bucket, but the worst thing imaginable happens just then: the engine stalls. Kenichi desperately tries to start the excavator again, but he's having no luck, so Anemone tries to buy him some time and begins casting the spell for explosion magic. Even though it's her first time, she perfectly recites the spell and casts an explosion that sends the spider flying into the wall. Kenichi finally manages to get the excavator back up and running, so he once again drives straight at the spider and proceeds to crush it against the ceiling until the spider finally dies. After all is said and done, Kenichi stores his excavator as well as the spider's body. And normally he would be really upset because he had to spend 10 million on that excavator, but after mining the gems, he made more than enough money to cover the costs. Once they get back to the surface, Kenichi asks Anemone if she managed to learn how to use explosion magic because he doesn't remember seeing her practice it. So she tells him that this was the first time she ever tried it, which makes them really impressive that she pulled it off. They eventually return home, and although Primula knew they were going spider hunting, she never could have imagined that the spider would be this big. After Primula calms down, Kenichi heads inside to start preparing dinner, but to everyone's horror, he plans to use an egg he found in the spider to make it. Everyone else thinks it's going to be disgusting, but Kenichi is curious about what a giant spider egg would taste like, so he starts making an omelet. He has a bunch of other stuff in there, so by the time he's done, the food actually looks pretty good. So Anemone decides to take a chance and tries a piece, and surprisingly, the egg balls taste really good. The others decide to try some too, and Primula is impressed because she can tell that Kenichi made these with cheese. And cheese is really expensive in this world because it's only made in a particular region. However, Kenichi tells her it's actually really easy to make cheese. As soon as he says this, Primula suddenly gets in his face and asks him to teach her how to make cheese. Kenichi normally doesn't like revealing recipes, but since Primula was so persistent, he decides to show her how to make it. All you need is some milk and apple vinegar, and a cheesecloth. And once you're done mixing, you'll have a nice serving of cottage cheese. Everyone tries a piece, and they are in awe that Kenichi knows how to make something so tasty. But all of a sudden, Primula asks Kenichi if it would be alright for her to share this recipe with Lady Eupatorium. Kenichi really doesn't like the idea of getting involved with nobility, so he asks Primula why she wants to share it with Eupatorium. Primula explains that for the past few days, her food business has been getting harassed non-stop, and it's more than Naomina could possibly handle. Primula's business is being targeted because they know she doesn't buy her spices from the Spice Syndicate, and Thoughtolum, one of the most corrupt merchants in the city, was behind it all. Primula can't deal with Thoughtolum on her own, which is why she wants to get on Eupatorium's good side, so she'll deal with it for her. Again, Kenichi doesn't like the idea of relying on nobles, so he tells Primula that he would be more than happy to squish Thoughtolum under his excavator. But Primula tells him he doesn't need to do that because she would like to avoid a physical confrontation as much as possible. Kenichi understands if he tells Primula she's free to use his recipe, but he doesn't want Eupatorium to start bothering him, so he asks Primula to keep his identity secret. The next day, Thoughtolum is in his office when all of a sudden one of his henchmen brings him a decree from Lady Eupatorium that says anyone caught causing trouble for Primula's business will be severely punished, and even Thoughtolum isn't foolish enough to go against a decree from a noble, but he's still confident that he will get his way eventually. Things go back to normal for Primula, and she's able to get on with her business without being harassed anymore. But a few days later, Eupatorium shows up at Kenichi's doorstep because she wants to meet with him. Primula didn't mention Kenichi to her at all, but she already knows all about Kenichi's achievements from Dahlia, which is why she's come here to beg Kenichi for a favor, and Kenichi can already tell that this is going to be troublesome. The story continues. We see Eupatorium was given a task of building a canal through the kingdom, but she's running late on construction, and if the project isn't completed soon, then her funding will be stripped and her land might even be taken away from her. The remaining section of the canal that needs to be built is 15 kilometers long, and she needs to get it down within a month, so she begs Kenichi to help her. She was willing to give him whatever reward he desires, even her body, but Kenichi tells her he's not into that. Eupatorium is disappointed that she got turned down, but she's still got one more thing to offer, so she tells Kenichi she can give him a special grimoire as his reward, high protection. Kenichi doesn't really know what high protection is, but Naomina has heard of it before, so she tells him that high protection is an extremely powerful spell that allows a person to block any attack, and that piques Kenichi's interest since it could help protect an Emin. He agrees to help Eupatorium, but before any construction can begin, he needs funds. So he asks Eupatorium to give him any unused furniture she has so he can appraise it and get money from his system. By the time he is done with all that, Kenichi earns about 120 million yen, and that should be more than enough to cover the cost of using his heavy machinery, so he's ready to begin. Everyone gets into Kenichi's car so he can drive them to the construction site, and along the way, Eupatorium asks Kenichi if he really doesn't want her body as a reward. Kenichi firmly tells her nah, I'm good, but that just makes Eupatorium upset because she knows he has no problem sleeping with beast women, so why won't he sleep with her? They eventually arrive at the construction site, and Kenichi happens to run into Miley's brothers Nyakuro, Nyamoro, and Nyanji. It's nice to see them again, but Kenichi is curious why they are out here working construction. They receive a ton of money from the payout for killing Shaga, so they should have been set for a long time. But one thing led to another, and one catnip binge later, they were broke again. All of a sudden, Naomina comes up to see what's going on, and the second Miley's brothers see her, they practically fall in love. But moving on, Eupatorium introduces Kenichi to Porridge, the man she hired to oversee the construction work. Porridge tells her she didn't need to come all the way out here in person, but Eupatorium says it's important because she brought someone to help. She tells them that Kenichi will be able to speed up the process by a lot because he's a mage, but Kenichi tells him he's just a merchant. Anyway, Porridge has no reason to refuse additional help, so he decides to continue his work and asks Eupatorium to have a look at the bill for the equipment she will need. While Eupatorium is looking at it, Primula takes a look as well, and she's disgusted by the prices she is seeing. She asks Eupatorium to let her handle looking through the bill, and after reading the entire thing, she is sure that Porridge is trying to rip Eupatorium off. Porridge defends himself, saying he needs to make profit off the deal, and it's not like there are any other merchants that Eupatorium can order 1,000 axes from. However, he was wrong about that last part because Primula simply turns to Kenichi and asks him if he can get 1,000 axes. Kenichi buys the axes from his store and asks Eupatorium if an axe like this will work. She tells him it's perfect, but she's curious about how much he's going to charge, so Primula says Eupatorium just needs to pay 1 silver coin per axe. That's a ridiculously low price, so Eupatorium asks if Kenichi is really alright with it, and he says she can just think of it as a friend discount. Eupatorium is delighted to hear that, so she says she will buy from Kenichi instead and fires Porridge. Porridge gets angry and reminds her that he's here on behalf of the Thogalum Trading Company, so going against the moon isn't well for her. Kenichi recalls that Thogalum was the guy behind all the trouble of Primula's doll, and apparently he's so influential that even the Lord asks for his help occasionally, so getting on his bad side could cause a lot of trouble. But right now, building the canal is more important, so everyone begins work right away. Since his backhoe is going to be used a lot, Kenichi is going to need a lot of fuel, so he pours out 3 basins worth of fuel, and a few minutes later they finally begin working. Kenichi's machine is a huge help since it can do work that would take them hours and only a few minutes. After a long day of work, Kenichi prepares a meal for his friends and offers some to Eupatorium. She's surprised that he can make such decent food even though he's in the middle of the forest, and it tastes absolutely delicious too. Kenichi notices Nyanji and the others staring at the food from over there, so he invites them to come eat with him. But they aren't the only ones who are hungry right now. Pretty much all the workers are starving because the tavern they usually go to is in the city, so it'd be too expensive for them to go make the journey. Primula feels bad for them, so she comes up with an idea and asks Kenichi for permission to use his recipe to feed all the workers. Of course, she's still going to charge them, but it will be a fair price so everyone can afford to eat. All the workers are overjoyed to have food to eat, so the work site practically turns into a party, and Eupatorium loves how lively everything is. Later that night, Kenichi sets up a bath and tells Eupatorium she can use it to clean herself up. Eupatorium is amazed that Kenichi can create a bath out here in the middle of the woods, but as Kenichi is about to leave, she grabs his arm and orders him to bathe with her. Kenichi is trying his best to resist Eupatorium because he's technically married to Primula, and he's got to take care of an Emin, so he can't just indulge whenever he feels like it. Eupatorium admires the fact that Kenichi cares so much about his family, because when it comes to her family, they barely even acknowledge her as a person. All of her parents were concerned about was who Eupatorium would end up marrying. Kenichi tells her that sounds sad, but it's got nothing to do with him, so he leaves the bathroom before Eupatorium tries to seduce him again. The next morning, Kenichi wakes up early, and the first thing he sees is Eupatorium working hard to distribute food to all the workers. For a second, he starts thinking that maybe it wouldn't be so bad to clap Eupatorium's cheeks at least once. As soon as he starts thinking that, all the girls close in on him because they can tell what Kenichi is thinking. But he tells them he wouldn't actually sleep with Eupatorium because she's a married woman and he's smart enough to avoid that drama. Eupatorium knows Kenichi doesn't want to fall for her, but she's got a whole month with him, so sooner or later she's going to make him give in. A few moments later, Porridge and one of his associates return to the work set to complain because none of the workers have been coming to the tavern they run to eat. Primula tells them that's because she started selling food to them at an affordable price, so none of the workers need to go to their tavern anymore. And she makes it clear that the reason they lost their customers isn't because Primula stole them, it's because they were setting their prices way too high. So if they ever hope to recover, they need to start being more honest in their business. After that, work continued as usual, and after the trees had been cut down, Kenichi drove past in his backhoe to put all the wood and debris in his storage. They were making good progress on the canal, and by noon Eupatorium's servants finally arrived, so there are a lot more people than before, and water is starting to become a bit of an issue. He could buy it from his store, but that would be really expensive, so he decides to make a deal with the beast folk instead. They tell them about a nearby spring, but it's pretty much impossible to reach unless you have cat-like agility, so Kenichi offers to give them alcohol if they fetch water for him. The beast folk really love alcohol, so they eagerly accept his deal, and before long, Kenichi's water supply issues is resolved. While all the beast folk are enjoying their alcohol, Kenichi says he's going to go to bed. But before he can leave, a drunk Eupatorium puts her arm around him and starts dragging him off to the bedroom, and let's just stay Kenichi folded. A little while later, Eupatorium falls asleep, so Kenichi leaves the guest room and tries to head back into the main house, but an Emin doesn't let him in because she knows what he did. Eventually, a Strange's section of the canal is completed within the 1-month deadline, and is officially opened during a ceremony where the royal family was present. Kenichi wanted to avoid the ceremony altogether, but Eupatorium ended up pressuring him into attending anyway. And in the middle of the ceremony, Eupatorium ends up calling on Kenichi to demonstrate the unique magic that made this project possible. Kenichi has no choice now, so he decides to just go with it and summons his backhoe to put on a little demonstration for everyone to see. The crowd is amazed as Kenichi balances a log on the end of the backhoe, and it's really impressive. But where did Kenichi learn to do that? After the ceremony is over, Eupatorium is approached by Viscount Thunberg, and he can't believe that the mage who defeated Shaga is really in Estrantia. He was sure that Eupatorium would end up losing her land and have to flee the country, but Eupatorium laughs in his face and tells him his joke is almost as funny as that sorry excuse for a mustache on his face. Kenichi sees all this happen, and he assumes it's just a rivalry between nobles, but Primula notices something unsettling. There's an old man in Thunberg's carriage, and it's the same man who was stripped of his status in Dahlia after it was discovered that he was the one who hired Shaga to kidnap Primula. The next day, Kenichi meets with Graham, Eupatorium's husband, and he wants to personally thank Kenichi for all the help he offered in completing the project. Till now, he hadn't really put much effort into maintaining his territory, but after nearly losing it because of the deadline, he's ready to turn over a new leaf. Also, there's one more thing he wanted to talk to Kenichi about because he found one of the pictures Kenichi sold a while ago, and he really wants to know how Kenichi made them. Kenichi proceeds to show Graham the entire printing process, and Graham is excitedly listening to every word. But little does he know, he's talking to the guy who slept with his wife. After Kenichi has taught him how to make the pictures, they get back to their discussion, and Graham says he would like to hire Primula to handle Estrantia's finances. And Primula is grateful for the opportunity, but it would be too much for her to handle on her own, so she asks Graham if she can ask her father for support. Graham knows Mallow from the Mallow Trading Company is a big deal over in Dahlia, so he would be more than happy to have such a good merchant working with him. But he's not sure if it would be a good idea, since establishing connections with one of the most influential merchants in Dahlia might provoke Thogalum to act. Kenichi has been hearing a lot about Thogalum recently, so he asks why Graham doesn't just kick Thogalum out of Estrantia, since he clearly doesn't like him. Graham is embarrassed to admit this, but with Estrantia's current budget, they can't afford a night order. So if it came down to a battle against Thogalum and his men, it's safe to say that they lose. However, Eupatorium tells her husband that they stand a good chance of winning since they have Kenichi and his magic machine, and she's sure Kenichi would be willing to fight for them after all, he's her friend. Kenichi doesn't like how he keeps getting involved in troublesome things, but since the situation is pretty serious, he agrees to help fight Thogalum if it ever comes down to it. Later that night, Kenichi and the others return to their original spot and Kenichi puts their house back in its place. They also got the high protection grimoire that Eupatorium promised them, so Anemone can start learning to use the spell soon. But for now, everyone takes a bath under the stars to relax. That brings the episode to an end. Thanks for watching. Want next part? Subscribe the channel and turn on notification bell.